What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. Today is the day that we've all been kind of waiting for. We're that much closer to the regular season, but today was the day that NFL teams across the league had to cut down to their final 53-man roster. Morgan, and the Lions made some pretty shocking cuts in a couple of different areas. And so in today's video, we're going to kind of go through some of our biggest surprise in terms of cuts, some of our biggest surprises in terms of keeps. What do we think of the roster as a whole? And then kind of just looking ahead in terms of what other possible moves the Lions could make, now that the roster has been cut down. Because unlike the rest of the league, the Lions actually cut their roster down to only 50, which means there's 3 open spots left on the team, and there's still some jostling they could possibly do, potentially with some guys on the roster in terms of either possibly cutting some additional players or moving players on or off the IR list or the PUP list. So those are a couple things that we definitely got to keep in mind, Morgan, when it comes down to this final roster, right?
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say you have to keep in mind the fact that they could still be doing some maneuvering. Like there's a good chance like Dan Skipper could end up being on the roster. I've seen conflicting stuff out there, but there's a lot of stuff that can be done. I know people are going to talk about the Ahmed Hassani news, which shocked me too. I don't think any of us at POD had him not in the 53. Caught us off guard. It's an injury settlement. There's a lot of nuance to this. And I will say, Jeremy wrote a terrific article where he spelled everything out yesterday on the Pride of Detroit website. So shameless plug there, that thing, if you like, bookmark it, because there is a lot to this. And so, I'm excited to get into it. Top to bottom, I want to remind everybody some of the pandemonium. This is a fantastic roster, man. This is a top 5 roster in the NFL, right? Like top to bottom, Miko. I don't bias or not,
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And I think I'm going to actually pull up the Lions roster as far as how it currently stands with those 50 players. You guys can actually get, this full breakdown over at prideofdetroit.com. That's actually where we're going to get this list from. So yeah, again, shameless plug here of us just going through our own website, but looking at just the first 4 position groups, right? I don't think there's a lot of surprises here, Morgan. I think probably one of the biggest surprises for some people is going to be what they did at wide receiver in terms of keeping Dominic Lovett over Jackson Meeks and potentially not keeping 7 wide receivers instead of just 6. But I made this argument on the podcast where I understood that Jackson Meeks was having a fantastic preseason and definitely, had the size, the measurables, and was making the type of plays that would make you wonder, like, hey, could the Lions keep him? Dominic Lovett, to me, from the time they drafted him, it just felt like they had a plan for him. And the fact that he missed a preseason game because of injury, I don't think that was really going to deter the fact that they had a plan for him in terms of his special teams ability and possibly being what some people are at least speculating for him to be a possible Khalif Raymond replacement down the line if he can really round himself out as a solid punt and kick return.
No, that's a good call because that was the only one I got wrong of this group off the top for when we did our roster prediction at POD. So yeah, I thought Meeks' production was going to shine through. I had contemplated is Levitt's easier to sneak through waivers, but to your point, Miko, they had a chance to draft Jackson Meeks and they didn't, and they drafted Dominic Lovett, and I 100% agree with you now because the proof is in the pudding. But look at this position group guy. Your skill players are crazy. Mm-hmm. I just want everyone soak this in, man. This is a crazy roster that Brad Holmes has built. I know there's going to be some shuffling here, like we talked about at the top, but yeah, I'm excited about Lovett because I do think he showed some things. There, he had his hiccups too, but he's also a rookie. But overall, we gotta like what we're looking at, right, Miko?
Yeah, I think obviously you still have Jared Goff as your starting quarterback. Kyle Allen won the backup job handedly, feeling great about the running back duo of Gibbs and Montgomery. And then you still have, again, solid depth with both Reynolds and Vaki. We didn't get to see a ton of Vaki this preseason, but the Lions still have, it's similar, I think, in the Dominic Lovett situation where it's okay, yeah, he didn't get to play a lot, but we have a plan for him. We know how we can utilize him in the event that, whether it's special teams or we need him in a pinch, we can kind of rely on him. The receiver position in terms of both wide receiver and tight end, these first three, right? Amon Ra, JMO, you have Tim Patrick, which didn't get a ton of run with the first team, later in camp, but I still expect him to have a role. Khalif, which is, again, a little surprising to see him get so much run with the ones, but dangerous weapon. And then Isaac Taslaw is someone that I think everyone is excited to see how he's going to be utilized once the regular season gets here. And then the tight end position is still solid. You still have Sam Laporta. You still brought back Brock Wright. Shane Zylstra, I thought, was a fairly easy shoe-in for tight end 3. Kind of really hard to be surprised or upset by anything with, the skill positions, and then kind of moving into the offensive line. Anything here that kind of stands out to you when you start looking at that group?
No, and to put a bow on it, man, you got a top 5 player at the position at every skill position, so that's pretty nice, I'll say.
Yeah.
you know?
I think that's something that a lot of people sleep on with this roster, right? Like, I mean, you go back up here, you got Jameer, again, top 3, top 5 running back. Amon Ra, top 5, wide receiver in the league. Sam Laporta, top 3, in my opinion, tight end in the league right now.
Yep.
Even, again, with Jared, I still think Jared's a top 10 quarterback based off of how he's been performing and playing. And then you start to get down to this offensive line group, and you have, again, the best tackle in football led by Penei Sewell.
Yep. And overall, I don't think anyone was really shocked here by what took place besides the Dan Skipper news. And listen, man, I've never been the biggest Dan Skipper fan. I think it's tough, like being that tall and trying to play offensive line in the NFL. Like there was just this news about King Dunlap. He was in the Raw Room, that they have a really good podcast, and he was like, "Man,
Mm-hmm.
I used to hunch over because I didn't want people to know how tall I was because they'll knock you for it." And you kind of
Yep.
see why with some of Skipper's struggles, excuse me. So, like I mentioned, though, that's another one that could circle back to the practice squad. But I don't know. Jamarco Jones maybe played a little bit better than him in the preseason, depending on who you ask. Always knew they were going to keep Coyote Iwashika, right, Miko? Like he's got
Yeah.
experience. Obviously, Hank Fraley trusts him a bit. And then good to see Kingsley Guakin. Excuse me. I almost took a Eric move there. Guakin. Good to see him make the final 53 because I know he was on the P squad last year and they liked what he was doing.
Yeah, I think of these two groups, or just of the offensive line in general, I think Kingsley was one that was a little bit of a surprise, and not actually, I wouldn't say a surprise. I will say Kingsley is the one that was is curious to see, to play around with the thought of, do you think Kingsley would have made the roster if Tristan Colon had stayed healthy? Because I thought up until that point of him getting hurt, I thought he was playing a little bit better than Kingsley was. And the fact that injury happens, and I think that kind of opened the door a little bit for Kingsley to be able to make the roster. But it's still solid depth to have behind Graham as somebody that can play center, but also has a lot of versatility playing the other interior offensive line positions as well.
Yeah, and I hope Kingsley can continue because he's got a lot of tools, right? He's athletic, he can move in space. But his weakness right now, just because he's a little bit smaller, is his anchor, his ability to hold up against the premier interior defensive lineman in this league. And the Lions do have some scary ones on their schedule this year, so
Mm-hmm.
something to keep in mind. And just hoping everyone can stay healthy on the interior, so we don't have to worry about that, right? And don't worry, I got y'all.
Absolutely. All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the football, because I think that's, again, where we start to get a little bit of an insight into how this group is going to be set up. And I think one of the things that's probably the most going to be talked about the most is what they decided to do with the defensive end group, right? You kept Aiden Hutchinson, obviously. Marcus Davenport, Al-Qadim Muhammad had a great offseason. But then, that's pretty much it. You have Josh Pascal that's on NFI right now. And then, like you mentioned it at the top here, they decided to waive Ahmed Hassanim with an injury settlement. That's a little shocking, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of nuance to that, but essentially, the way you want to think about it, folks, is Ahmed is being waived with an injury settlement, so he's free to sign with another team. But you never know if these players don't have like a handshake agreement, like, hey, I'm going to clear waivers and return, so hold before, we jump to conclusions there. I think we have to see what happens in these next few days. But yeah, this is a thin position, and this is where I think all the talk about a certain player named Zadarius Smith is going to come into the conversation for a lot of Lions fans, right?
Yeah, and I understand why, right? You don't have any other pure edge players right now. Maybe you have a couple guys, as we start to kind of get down to the defensive tackle group, right? Makai Wingo can kind of flex out to the outside and play some of that, it's like kind of like a hybrid position in that light. Obviously, Pat O'Connor is someone else that can also like flex out wide and play one of like a big end position, but that's still very light. And so I think there is going to be a lot of clamoring for Zadarius Smith. Obviously, the report came out today that other teams have been contacting Zadarius as well, other contenders. And so it's going to be interesting to see, like, do the Lions budge at all? Do they make any type of concessions to get Zadarius here? Because, like we said, only have 50 players on the roster, so signing him wouldn't be an issue. It's not a matter of you having to cut anybody or anything like that. I think it's purely speculation, but I feel like it's always come down to like how much money do the Lions want to pay somebody like Zadarius Smith that is a very proven pass rusher, but is probably going to play more of a reduced snap count if he comes back onto this version of the Lions, because you do have Aiden Hutchinson, you do have Marcus Davenport. Is Zadarius going to be okay with playing fewer snaps and being more of a rotational guy? I would like to think so, right? Like as a guy that's getting up there in age.
Yeah, and I would think it's a good situation for him because then you can do a lot of things with your fronts. Like if you did get Zadarius back in the fold on pass rushing downs, it could be, Hutchinson, Tyleek, Marcus Davenport, Zadarius Smith. That's a scary front to deal with and a big imposing front too. So I think, like you
Mm-hmm.
talked about, Makai Wingo, Pat O'Connor, guys like that, they can play out there at the 5 tech, at the big end, like the 4 eye. Sometimes Lions have it line up. So they can play that, but you'd obviously like to get Zadarius or someone of the like back in the fold. I'm not going to trip if they don't get Zadarius, but I do think help has to be inbound with one of these three roster spots.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing that's pretty telling here, with the looking at the defensive tackle group, Chris Smith making the roster, I think is also like a really good nod to him. Maybe not the same type of versatility as some of the other guys, but someone that's solid in the run game. And that's something that we talked about, I want to say like almost a month ago. Like with the way that this interior defensive line is set up, you're going to be really hard pressed to run on this Detroit Lions team. And so whether that's with DJ Reader and Tyleek Williams in the front, or if Roy Lopez is rotating in, or if Chris Smith is rotating in on certain games if he's active, like you're going to have a really tough time just moving bodies in the middle of that defensive line.
Yeah, and Chris Smith's been around the roster for a little bit now, so they obviously like what he can do. Can play a little bit of that one tech, that nose on the outside shoulder of the center, excuse me. So he can do a little bit of that. And it's important to remember, like when Aleem does come back, that might put someone like Chris Smith's roster spot in jeopardy because depending on how things shake out. So important to keep
Yeah.
that in mind too. Like that room will look a little bit different once they get Big 54 back, and that will be nice, especially once they get him up to speed. Because then, like you talked about, Miko, you can mix and match and get really crazy with that front.
Yeah, 100%. Moving to the linebacker group, I think this was the group that I feel like was the easiest to predict, in my opinion, Morgan. Like these six guys, right? Obviously, you have your starting three with Anzalone, Jack Campbell, and Derek Barnes. But then Grant Stewart, Trevor Nowatzki, and Zach Cunningham, like from the time camp kicked off, we're making a very strong claim of like, yeah, these will be your three reserve linebackers. I think similar to the Aleem situation, it's going to be interesting to see like who's the first one out of this group, if or not if, but when Malcolm returns. But you gotta like the first like this group of players.
Yeah, and Nowaski's the backup to Barnes at the Sam. He can do a little bit of that. They shift him. They got some looks with him at the Mike. Stewart is going to be a special teams demon and maybe a kick returner, as we saw. And then
Mm-hmm.
Cunningham has tape out there, man. So not all of it has been pretty these last couple years, but he held up better against the run on tape than I gave him credit for when he got to Detroit. Like I thought that might have been a little bit of an issue because it was at his last couple stops, but he looked okay and he's good insurance at the will, at the mic. So you have some flexibility there too. So, but like you said, when Malcolm comes back, that attrition might come from that room too. So have to see in a few. Well, I'm not sure how long, another month or so.
I was gonna say probably a couple months still left out for Malcolm
Okay,
to kind of
couple.
be back. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll say like between the secondary and the specialist group, like this is exactly how I predicted this group to kind of go through. When on the last podcast, Jeremy, Ryan, and myself were talking about this group as far as the secondary. And I was very content, Morgan, with the group looking just like this, simply because you have so much versatility across the board, right? Like Kirby is probably like your only like true pure safety. Like that's the only position that you want Kirby playing. Everybody else can rotate across that secondary group, whether it's playing outside corner, whether it's playing nickel, whether it's playing safety. So having 8 guys between corner and safety felt right to me.
Yeah, and some of these guys are just, can't be pigeonholed, like you said. You know what I mean? Like Rocky Sin and Avante Maddox, they can all, they can play down and play corner, nickel, or they can be, safety. Like I think Avante Maddox would step in pretty well there. He's a vet. He's seen it and done it. But yeah, overall, I like this group a lot. Like this is another big strength of the team, and you get keep everybody on the field and watch things go. I'm excited, man, because if this defensive line can pressure like they were at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of last year, like before 97 went down and 54 and yada yada, there could be a lot of takeaway opportunities if you get my drift. I'm gonna go ahead and knock on wood again. I got y'all.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I will say though that is a little interesting, that was a little surprising, at least in seeing how Jeremy has it listed out, and I'm assuming this is also how the Lions have it listed out, is that Avante Maddox was listed as a corner and Rocky
Yeah.
Sin is listed as safety, when like I think at the beginning of training camp, a lot of us would have had it flipped. Like even though they started obviously using Rock way more at safety as the preseason went on, like I still would have expected this to be flipped in terms of them possibly seeing, Rocky Sin as CB3 and Avante Maddox being safety 3. There might be a situation here where Rocky Sin might be safety 3, and that's a little surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it shows the versatility, and that's what the Lions kind of covet outside of, like, Terrion's an outside corner. Like you said, Kirby's that deep, like, middle third safety that can, just be a ball hawk and patrol and has that range. So, but other than that, you got a lot of versatility where people can move all around. And I think that's vital because they're big, which I love. Get your best guys on the field. Like, I know positions
Yeah,
matter and roles matter. Get your most talented cats on the field, and I feel like things take care of themselves.
yeah. And then last but not least, we have the specialists. None of these guys had competition going into camp, so again, there's nothing to be surprised about. This is the easiest group to predict going into the regular season.
Yeah, all three of these guys had a nice chill summer. They've just been in Allen Park kicking and chilling. No, I'm being mean, but yeah, they didn't have any competition. There was no Jake Bates had his ups and downs, but at this point, I trust that guy. You read that article that someone wrote on the Athletic. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. Fantastic article. I trust that kid now. He's going to miss kicks here and there, but we've seen him make big ones, and that's what I care about when it comes to my specialists, as much as I don't care about special teams.
Absolutely. So before we kind of get out of here, I guess I do want to ask you, and I know you said it at the top of this of the video, but like you feel really strongly about this roster going into the season. You feel like it's still a top 5 roster. In your opinion, where do you feel like they're the strongest going into the season?
I think secondary, which is crazy to think about where we were
Mm-hmm.
only a few years ago,
Right?
where it was far from a strength, man. But you just have, like, I really trust like what people are saying about Terrion. I think having to
Mm-hmm.
go against Amon Ra and Jameson and these demons on offense helps him a lot. And a lot of people have talked about how good he's looked. I trust DJ Reed. Like I've said before, I think he's the same caliber player as like a Carlton Davis. And Carlton Davis, if you guys have watched his channel for a little bit, me and Miko calling that man a baller. That was a
Yeah.
huge loss. And I'm glad he got paid in New England. I hope you have fun in Boston. Carlton, if you're watching this, hope you are. But yeah, I think it's the secondary, but there's a couple other places. What about you?
Yeah, I was gonna say the only other place that's like definitive for me is actually there's a couple, but I'm gonna go the skill
It's
positions.
tough.
And I know we talked about it earlier, but like, and that includes receivers and running backs. Like that tandem is still arguably like I would even say top 3. right? Like it's that good when you look at the likes of Jameer Gibbs, David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta. Like
Just
that,
those.
those core players right there are incredible on their own. And then you sprinkle in, an Isaac Tislaw, you sprinkle in a Tim Patrick, you know, Brock Wright can hurt you if you forget about him on some of these plays and things like that. So I really love what the Lions have in the skill position. And I do think there's a possibility because we haven't seen them. They didn't get they got no run during the preseason. That maybe it might take a little bit for them to kind of get their wheels turning and things like that. But fortunately, you get two division opponents that don't have the scariest of secondaries. Well, sorry, Green Bay doesn't. Chicago, Jalen Johnson is still easily the best corner in the division right now. But
Yeah, he's
that
starting on the IR though, or NFI. So
So okay, so then I'll actually go back to what I said. Then you go against two secondaries that aren't overly like equipped to handle the talent that you have, specifically in the passing game, and then as well as what you have in the run game. So I'm excited to see what the Lions can do with these players. I'm excited to also see like how they continue to flesh out this roster because there are three open spots that can potentially be, yes, one of those could potentially be Zadarius Smith. But like we stated at the top, like this is a cut across the entire league. Everybody's trimming their roster. So it'll be interesting to see, did the Lions, identify anybody on another roster that's possibly getting cut, and are they bringing in anybody? Are they putting in any waiver claims of their own? And then obviously there's the practice squad. That's got to get filled out, and we know how Dan values the practice squad. It'll be interesting to see which of their own players they keep on the practice squad and what additional players they maybe bring in from other teams and other organizations.
yeah, and it's like so it's 16 players now. The practice squad is so, and Dan always talks about it's an extension of the roster, like Miko said, right? Like 69 players total. And to your point about like what you're talking about with other people getting cut from other teams, this is where your pro personnel department comes in. Like when you see that,
Mm-hmm.
so and so in the pro personnel department, they're the ones responsible for keeping tabs and scouting and watching the tape of other teams to see, like who we need to keep an eye on in case they do hit waivers.
Yep.
So yeah, the Lions won't be. I can't remember what they are in the process, probably 26th or something like that because they lost early in the playoffs. But it's not like they're high. But like you said, they could have their eye on somebody, and the next couple of days, I'm sure, will flesh out more of like what we are, getting the answers to what we're looking for.
And one thing I do want to ask you, I'll ask you one more thing and then we can get out of here. Going back to the Ahmed Hassanin thing, right? In terms of him getting an injury settlement, where is your concern level in regards to him possibly getting claimed? Because I have seen that from people like on Twitter and that are fans that are just like, man, like are the Lions rolling the dice? Are they taking an unnecessary risk by possibly subjecting him to waivers?
It could be, I don't know. It's a tricky situation, right? Because if someone were to claim him, they have to have him on their active roster for 3 weeks, right? So, and if with him being injured, I don't know if a team really, really wants him. I think you do run the risk because they're like, okay, we're like the Saints. Like maybe the Saints really want him. They're like, we're about to suck. Playing Spencer, playing Spencer Rattler. This roster's not good. We don't care. That could happen. I'm sorry if anyone's a Saints fan watching this. I send my love to you. We've been there back in the day. But there, if a team did want some, like if they coveted him like that, then maybe. But I don't know. I think he's just gonna hopefully go unclaimed. I hope there's a handshake agreement and he reverts back to the P squad and they do some stuff there because I liked what I saw on tape, but yeah, to your point, some other team could have liked what they saw too, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing that like I think about. It's absolutely a risk. Like if you're concerned about, man, the Lions took a risk, like it is because someone could claim him. But it kind of goes back to what you're saying, Morgan. Like there's only so much tape on him at this point, and he is injured. So if you're putting a waiver claim on him, you're willing to sign him for the fact of like he has a pec injury. You're gonna have to figure out like how long he's basically going to be out, for yourself. And then in addition to that, like he's still raw in my opinion, Morgan. Like obviously as a Lions fan, I'm excited for what he can be, but he's still very raw as a pass rusher. He's still learning how to defend the run at the NFL level. Granted, he seems to be more advanced in that department than he does pass rushing, but like that's a really big gamble to take on a guy that is both injured, that is raw, and you have to be sure he fits your scheme because at least the Lions feel fairly confident that he does theirs. And it also, the last thing I'll say on this, it does make me curious because the Lions could have just made him one of their, early season IR designations and just carried him into the season there. The fact that they didn't do that makes me wonder if those spots are already being like allocated, if they're planning to allocate those spots to other players, or like something that Jeremy did outline on the website in terms of like IR and things like that. Like the Lions only have 8 of those that they can use throughout the season. So are they just trying to give themselves more like wiggle room to the event that if they have to put somebody on IR, that they can have that flexibility to, bring people back without having to worry about like possibly running out of spots based like kind of like how they did last year.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it sounds like a lot 8, but you see how quickly they ran out of those last year. They ran out of those like by I don't know before Thanksgiving.
I was gonna
Like
say it was getting
it, it happened quick, man. Life comes at you fast in the NFL. So I hope that doesn't happen again this year. But that I don't blame them for being cautious with those, just not being willy nilly, if you will, because we saw how things could get out of hand last year. And I don't think Brad Holmes wants to go through that again. Putting in 3 waiver claims on a Monday.
exactly
So
right.
yeah,
Trying to find guys off the street that can play for you on Thursday,
that's I'd be stressed. I bet he was too. So yeah, I love. Great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
All right, guys. Well, yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for our initial reactions to the roster. Again, the things that what we really liked about the roster, a couple surprises that we saw here and there, and overall just where we think this roster is going to be strongest going into the regular season. But we want to hear from you guys as well. Let us know where you guys are most concerned about the roster, where you're most confident in the roster, and any surprise moves that possibly happened leading up to cut day. So let us know that all that in the comment section below. And like Morgan said at the top of the video, if you want to stay locked into any more news coming out, any potential roster moves that are going to be coming out as well, you want to stay tuned to prideofdetroit.com. There's a link in the description that'll take you over to the website. You can also stay locked into the YouTube channel as well. All you got to do is hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Trust me, I'm sure we're going to be dropping a lot more videos in the next couple of days, or at least in the next couple of weeks, talking about the roster. And hey, football's next
Games.
week. So we got even more stuff that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks. Where we're going to be talking about real football, reacting to how like this team looks, and on their march to making it to winning another division, hopefully getting into the playoffs, and then obviously, hopefully making it to that final dance. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll see you guys in the next one.